My soul looks out and wonders what happened to the dream. Like a mother awaiting the return of her child home, my longing is bursting at the seams. I wait with expecting urgency just to see his face again. I'll never forget the memory of the cage they placed him in. He got lost in the complicated reality between us and justice. Someone got hold of him, held him captive until a ransom could be paid, but that ransom was paid in blood. Blood, the most commodified commodity draped in detached philosophies backed by unfulfilled prophecies, and my soul cannot find its dream. Every day, I go out and post missing signs on neighborhood trees that read, "Have you seen my dream?" My soul holds rallies, calls in a search team, and like the movie Changeling, the community tries to convince my soul that the dream has been found. They've given me an imposter. Tell me I'm crazy. You don't recognize your own baby? Delusional not to recognize my own dream. But I know it's not him. My soul has waited for so long. I wonder if the dream will ever come home. Has he grown? Will he look different? Will he recognize me? In August of 1963, a young man spotted my dream on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. He told the story of where my dream had been and how an American named Abraham Lincoln found my dream 50 years ago, adopted him, and renamed him Emancipation Proclamation. By then, my dream had been seared in the flames of withering injustice, but this man, Martin was his name. He had seen my dream and he knew where it was. I rejoiced at the thought of my dream returning home to me. You see, my soul had waited so long. It was 240 years ago when I let my dream visit a governor in Virginia. You see, I wanted him to run free, to experience the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness I had placed inside of him. See, my dream had been seen by many. He was bright, vivid, like LED lights. Tens of millions came to see him dance on the shores. He had the ability to convince them to study war no more, to work hard and not settle for being poor, unrestricted by barriers. When folks saw him, they knew they would no longer be carriers of the social orders put in place to benefit one person at the expense of another, because, see, I was his mother, and I taught him to open doors. My dream provided the fine line between eloquence and plainness. I awaited the day that my dream would return home to me. So when I got a knock on my door, I rose from my chair, readied my soul, and answered my door with expecting urgency. "Miss America," the officer said, "may we come in?" I ushered them into my living room and held the door open just a little while longer. I thought perhaps my dream would walk in behind them, but I did not see him. Maybe he was waiting in the car. I took my seat and awaited the announcement of our reunion, but that wasn't what they had come to tell me. "America, your dream is dead," they said. In fact, I had not carried him full term. I had not birthed him. He was dead inside of me, and his decayed reality had been making me sick. Like a pregnant mother overdue, my soul had grown tired and anxious, trying to induce the contractions and force the birth of a nation conceived hundreds of years ago. I felt as if the world had stood still. I could hear the tick-tock of my clock on the wall and smell the burning of the wood in my fireplace. The room felt like it was closing in on me, and I just wanted to run. The officer explained that there were many researchers working my case and told me of how they had discovered my dead dream and the cause of his death. I felt as if I had nothing left, as they explained that it was a virus that had killed my beloved dream. Infected in utero, my dream had nowhere to go when this virus showed up on the scene. I could barely hear their voices over the sound of my own pain when a man checked my pulse to see if I was still in the room with them. That's when I heard them say that the name of the virus that had killed my beloved dream was called racism. I fell to my knees in tears. It It could not be true. My dream lives. That's when I heard a woman named Asada. She came and she tapped me on my shoulder. She said that they were sorry for my loss and that many had paid the cost in search of the American dream, that it was our duty to fight for freedom, but that the fight wasn't what it seemed. She reminded me of the many names that we gave him, the bold people that had given their lives trying to save him, and the captors that dared to try and lay claim to him. They told me it was time I have surgery to have the dead dream removed from my body. I felt numb. My dream, it had been so perfect. How could I let them take it away from me? This disease, this racism, it can't be what it seems, but if it is, racism is what they should be out there looking for. How dare they show up at my door without finding a cure for what was killing me softly as I speak? I grew weak at the sheer thought that anything that they said could be true. You see, I had clothed my baby in red, white, and blue. Just as I turned to run out of the door, a man in a black hat grabbed me by my hand and he asked me, "What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode?" I've come here today to answer his questions. So often, when we engage in conversations about race and racism, we reflect on the experiences that we've had and the feelings and emotions that accompany those experiences. It's a difficult conversation, one that can polarize a room in a matter of minutes. No one wants to bring it up. No one wants to be responsible, and ultimately, no one has a complete solution for how we deal with such a complicated matter. I've often wondered how and why this was the case. If we believe that we are living in a nation where all people are created free, and we should have access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, regardless of circumstances of birth, and if we can agree to believe in our Constitution, which states that we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, well, then how can racism really exist? It's antithetical to our beliefs. It makes no sense that one could buy freedom with slavery, independence with dependency, rights with wrongdoings. How can that be possible? Well, when I was around 12 years old, I remember finding $100 in an alley. The $100 was in a series of $20 bills, and when I got to the last $20 bill, I noticed that it was sitting next to a boot, and this boot was covered in blood. And next to the boot was a bullet shell casing, and I immediately began to put a story together in my mind of what had happened. But that didn't stop me from taking the money. In fact, I remember checking to make sure that there was no blood on the bills. A few weeks ago, I was reading an article where the author described an illustration they had seen done with an audience, much like this one. And in the illustration, the presenter pulls out a $100 bill and asks the audience who would be willing to take it. Immediately, folks begin raising their hands. Yes, I take the $100 bill. The presenter then takes the $100 bill, balls it up, steps on it, picks it up again and asks, would you still be willing to take it? Folks begin raising their hands. Yes, it still works. I take the $100 bill. The presenter then explains that the $100 bill had been used to buy drugs, that it had paid for prostitution, and that it had been stolen. The question was then asked again, would you be willing to take this $100 bill? Now, it was in reflecting on my own responses to these questions that I began to understand how it's possible to buy freedom with slavery and independence with dependency, rights with wrongdoings. See, the value of this $100 bill is not determined by its journey. Even dirty money will spend. Even if we know that this $100 bill has a terrible past, we can absolve ourselves of its history, and we certainly won't blame the bill for what it has been used to do. Just think about it. Have you ever tried to trace the serial numbers of the money in your purse or your wallet to see what it had been involved in? The question seems outrageous. What difference would it make? So long as you were not directly involved in any criminal activity, why should you be punished for the journey of the bills? You earned them fairly. Now, you might decide that you wanted to take those bills and burn them, but the system that gives value to that money would ultimately still exist. You might feel better about your personal values knowing that you've taken those bills out of the economy, but ultimately your act would be minute. There's a stark reality between our relationship with money and our relationship with racism. We generally know that the concept of race is used to do egregious things in our society, but we understand, even if we will not admit it, that the system that racism will allow us to gain access to will allow us to do great things, the same way that blood money can pay for a charitable donation. In fact, racism is a form of blood money. The deception of race is that it camouflages difference as deficiency and allows us to assign value to those differences. Now, when I began this evening, I told you the story of a mother who believed that her child was missing, only to discover that she was delusional and that the remains of her unborn baby were still in her womb. I named her child the American Dream, and I described racism as being the virus that had attacked the dream in her womb. The mother in my poem represents so many of us who just cannot accept the reality of what is happening because of the pain that it will cause, and because admitting the death of the dream would be to give up on its life and the promises that come along with it. Confronting racism can feel this way. It can cause you to become delusional, to become angry and lash out and not want to engage in the conversation any longer. Now, I don't know if you can relate to the feeling of having to say goodbye to someone or something that you love before it's time. And I certainly don't make light of these feelings and emotions at all, but I understand that we have to find a way to heal. Now, if racism was a person, we could hold a funeral and begin the grieving process, but racism is not a person. It impacts all areas of human activity, from sports, religion, love, education, and of course, commerce. My poem ends with the questioning, Langston Hughes' questioning of what happens to a dream deferred. I ask you this to invite you to begin to think about what happens when dreams die. What happened to America when the dream of our nation was not fully realized? When the ideals that we sought to escape were the very things that we used to build the formation of our country? Does racism sag like a heavy load? Or does it explode? I think we can answer yes to both questions, but what can we do about it? How can we rid ourselves of dirty money when the system that exists is upheld by that very same money? The harsh truth is that we cannot. We have to rid ourselves of the decaying dream that causes our society to become delusional. The first step to doing so begins with mindfulness. Like the mother in my poem, we have to come to terms with reality and begin the procedure of healing ourselves. Racism can behave as a virus. It mutates, feeds on living cells, and it will destroy its hosts without proper treatment. Some of us will feel its effects differently. We'll display symptoms differently, but we're all ultimately infected. Mindfulness is the first step to detecting how racism is spread in ways that we don't even know it. One such way is epistemic violence, which is simply violence on your way of knowing and what you consider to be knowledge. Take history, for example. Recall the number of tests that you were required to take in school that asked you questions about Native history, Native American history, or perhaps the number of books that you've been required to read about Native cultures. Now, while this might seem innocent, it becomes very clear to you early on in your process of schooling what is considered knowledge and what might just be considered an area of interest, but not necessary for you to continue on through your educational process, and certainly not necessary for you to maneuver through your daily existence. Mindfulness allows us to detect the subtle ways that racism is spread before major symptoms show up and we become so delusional that we look for other rational explanations because we have not learned to detect the behavior of the virus. The second action that we must engage in is radical love. Now, when I say radical love, I am simply describing a far-reaching, rigorous love. The kind of love that affects the fundamental nature of everything. The kind of love that you will pour on to a mother who is saying goodbye to her stillborn baby. The kind of love that will cause us to do uncommon things, like Will Smith in I Am Legend, for example. If you recall this movie, Will Smith plays a scientist who has survived a man-made plague that turns humans into bloodthirsty mutants. Throughout most of the movie, he travels through New York City alone, looking for other survivors and trying to create a cure using his own immune blood. Will Smith understands that he's outnumbered and that the mutants are just looking for him to make one mistake that would deliver him into their hands. Now, fighting against racism can feel very much the same way. By the end of the movie, Will Smith has discovered a cure, and he's not able to save himself, but he's able to develop something that allows him to heal those that have been infected and to secure healing for the coming generations. Now, our nation, our world, has seen the rise of so many martyrs who've given their lives in search for a curative justice. I believe that if many more of us would use our own blood, sweat, and tears to produce radical love, which we generate naturally in our own bodies, we can begin to heal ourselves before the virus of racism takes out another one of our legends. We have normalized racism, but it's not normal. There is blood on the bills. And if you are wondering what happens to a dream deferred, just turn on your local television or visit your local school or the ghettos or the triage centers where we keep our triage centers for those who visibly display the effects of racism. My soul looks out and wonders if we will continue to be deceived by the dead dream, or if we will begin to detect its toxic remains and get rid of those remains and begin to dream again. My soul looks out and wonders if you have seen my dream.